all, it is Nikki. Welcome back to the channel. So this week I wanted to do something a little bit more general that's not like specific to my projects, and it's something that has been swirling around in the back of my mind for the past little bit. A couple days ago I got the chance to get together with some friends that I hadn't seen in a while. They are the best. They love stories. One of them is actually a writer, and so we can have these awesome brainstorming conversations because it's just like the language they speak, they get it, and they just have great ideas. So we were able to talk about one of the ideas that I've been tossing around for the past like couple weeks. Very new idea. I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, but I needed their help kind of figuring out some character stuff. We had this great conversation. They gave me lots of great ideas, but afterwards I was thinking about it and it was like, I don't think I made that story sound very good. Just from the details that I gave them, I feel like the story sounded kind of bland, like it lacked substance. And then I realized that's because I really didn't tell them anything about the spiritual thread or the messages that I wanted to work into the story. So as a writer who is also a Christian, I feel like sometimes it's a little bit of an internal tug of war between the creative process or creative juices that just want to go in every direction at once and work on plot and world building and all the things, and the very real like objective of making sure that every story is rooted in truth and points to truth. I find especially in the brainstorming process, like very early in the birth of an idea, it's easy for that spiritual thread to get lost. I'm just so excited about figuring out like a plot and all these new characters and getting to know this new world that I can end up kind of forgetting about the spiritual thread. Like, oh, I'll work that in later, or I'll figure that out later. Problem with that for me is that it never takes me long to kind of lose my oomph with the idea and feel like, there's not really anything of substance here, because there isn't. When a story lacks that substance and lacks that sort of bit of transcendent truth that makes it something bigger than just a story, then it really just becomes like another daydream instead of something that could be of actual encouragement to somebody. So thinking about this lately has reminded me of the importance of bringing that into the process earlier. Like, instead of just getting caught up in the excitement of a new idea and then thinking about, okay, but what's it about? I want to sort of reverse that process and think about the meaning of the story even before I get into all the nitty-gritty details of what is actually going to happen. And that can happen on a character level usually. Like, I want to start thinking about the characters in terms of what their spiritual struggle is when I'm first creating them. How can I work in redemption? What do they need? What is their epiphany moment going to look like? Instead of sort of getting caught up in plot or other things first, I want to really look at that spiritual aspect of the story way early on so that that direction can guide the rest of the creative process. One thing I'm thinking of doing is creating like an ongoing list of possible spiritual threads. I might have to like open up a Google Doc and just have this ongoing kind of document that has ideas for things that I could work into characters to kind of give them like a spiritual struggle or something that they're working towards in their epiphany moment that would be the turnaround for them, or a particular theme that I find interesting in, I don't know, like a devotion or something. You go through life and hear things that are interesting and then you kind of just forget them. So I want to be better about writing things down, and like those ideas or those bits of inspiration that come for a possible spiritual thread for a story, I want to actually put them somewhere so that that list alongside my ongoing list of like plot ideas or character ideas or world ideas, like the more they grow, the more I could start to potentially see connections between them. Like, oh, I can see how, you know, this character would be a great fit for this particular struggle and I can build a story around that. I think that this spiritual theme could fit really well with this random idea for a world. And another strategy that is always helpful and is kind of just always the case for me is letting what's going on in my life and like my own struggles or like where I'm at in my spiritual journey inform the idea or inform what's going on in the story, which is something that God has actually been using a lot lately. One of my characters, for example, has recently just kind of taken on a life of his own. I wasn't expecting him to be this prominent, but he just really became prominent, and as I was writing him, his struggle really just kind of snapped into place on the page, and I realized that like what he deals with, while it's completely different than the things that I've gone through, the shape of the two struggles are pretty much exactly the same, and that we are trying to tackle our problems in the exact same way, or at least a very similar way. So in the story, there is a scene where he has an interaction with the kind of like Aslan figure, and that figure is kind of challenging him a bit about that and telling him that he needs to examine himself and pushing him to sort of think about how he's tackling his problems in the wrong way and what he should be doing instead. And I'm writing this and it's like, wow, this is not just for him, this is totally a message for me. Like, God is speaking to me through what's going on with my characters and through what's going on in my story, and that in itself was just like such a God hug. If this story never goes anywhere, or if I never even finish it, it was still worthwhile because I'm still thinking about that lesson that I feel like I was taught through this story. But it also just reminded me of the importance of having that thread in a story, of the importance of making sure that there's something substantial there, because whether you're like writing Christian fiction or whether you're just writing fiction as a believer, or, you know, even not as a believer, you do need that thread, that like moral direction, that epiphany moment, that substance, the depth, because like story is great plots are awesome, characters are awesome, but at the end of the day, the thing that is going to like earn your book a place in someone's heart that will have them just thinking about it again and again and again for years to come is the degree to which it resonated with them on like a deeply personal level. And so if you can like speak into someone's struggle or like be a voice of truth to them at a time when they really need it, like that's huge. How exciting is that? That's one thing that I find really encouraging about the work of Brandon Sanderson. And you guys all know that I like Brandon Sanderson stuff. Every fantasy writer likes Brandon Sanderson stuff, but it's not just because of like the plot or like the writing, although, you know, those are enjoyable. The part that I love most about reading the majority of Sanderson's stuff is that I trust him as an author to have something encouraging in his books. He always has that like encouraging, uplifting thread, or like that moral message that just is the backbone of the story and comes out in this big epiphany moment, and it's always so meaningful. And so I can trust when I'm reading his books that like I think that this is going in a good direction, and so I want to see where it plays out. I want to see where the redemption comes in, because there's always redemption. And I love that. I'm encouraged by the fact that he, as a general market writer, understands the importance of this and always puts something into his books that could be powerful and encouraging and meaningful to someone. He's putting something good into the world with his writing, and I think that that is awesome. That's compared to books or stories that are like so morally gray that you're left at the end thinking like, okay, but what do I take away from that? Like, what do I do with that? It was, you know, 2 hours or however many hours of a diversion for me, but now what? Did that help me at all? So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is for like Christian writers, but also for non-Christian writers. It's just like, what is your story doing? Like, is there something of substance there? Is there something deep? Is there something that could help someone or pick them up or give them something that they need in like a time when they really need it? And if not, like, why not? I think in some circles that might be looked down on, like, oh, you're thinking about like morals and messages, or you're like contriving that in advance. Ugh, what is this, Dr. Seuss? I disagree with that completely. I feel like that's maybe more of like a literary fiction thing, because in my experiences with literary fiction, just based on the stuff that I've had to read for school, it's often so focused on like exposing like the grittier, really real aspects of life that it can come off really kind of discouraging and can leave us there. And there's no hope at the end of it. It's kind of just depressing. And sure, like it's necessary to go to raw, gritty places in writing sometimes to make it authentic and to make sure that readers can really identify with the characters and understand the depth of what they're going through. But I don't think that we have to leave readers there. It's like our responsibility to give something encouraging and uplifting and to give hope with what we write, that no, there's a reason to push through that, and there's a reason to keep searching for hope. And that's why I want to be more intentional about giving my ideas to God way earlier in the process, instead of like plotting half a book and then giving it to God and trying to work in a spiritual thread. Like, I want to be better about doing that early on and thinking early on about, okay, what is this story going to do? What am I trying to accomplish with this? Like, how can I uplift someone through this? What are my characters going through that I could connect to something readers might be going through? Like, just thinking about that in advance, so that even if I'm